Okie dokie. Are you there, Luce?
Yep, I am here.
So, if we can just do a quick sound check on everyone. You go first, Si.
Pack it up, pack it in, let me begin. I can't win, battle me, that's a sin.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I only heard every second word there.
Yeah, I did. Also, only hear every second word. How's your Wi-Fi, Si?
It's pretty good. I'm right next to the router, but I don't really... Yeah, it should be fine.
All right, you're better now.
You might want to turn side H up a little bit as well, and then you're all quite even after that.
I have no idea how to do that, sorry.
Oh.
I think therefore I am. Let me have a little go. Sound levels. Is that your background noise, Luce? Can you mute yourself a sec?
Yeah, probably is, sorry.
Oh yeah, I think because you're not talking, it's like boosty. Okay. Sounds good. All right. I don't know how to turn individual people up on Skype, so we'll just have to go with it until I figure that bit out. All good?
All good.
All right.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're good.
Cool bananas. That's a magical moving thing. All right. Okay. Welcome to the Dakar halftime show. It's halfway through Dakar. We're at halftime. So, and it's been really exciting. The last week has been monumentally exciting. There's been a lot going on. And so, unlike in previous years, I thought it'd be a really good idea because we actually have a lot to talk about. Well, we have had the last week anyway on WhatsApp. We've talked a lot. To sit down and talk through the events of the past 6 days, the kind of highs and lows for different riders, and the things that have happened amongst the leadership and where that sets things up for week 2. I'm joined once again by Cy Hewitt.
Hello.
And Cy Pavey. I'm actually on location at the moment, and we're doing this through the Wi-Fi on my phone, so there might be a slight delay. It's not ideal, but we're doing the best we can. I also have a beer, as is standard when we make podcasts. I have an American IPA. Its bitterness is a 5 out of 10, and its original gravity is 15.4 degrees. I have no idea what that means, but it's got a nice label. So there we go. So
wow.
There we are. I don't really know where to start with the last week. So I'm going to go back to the last question we asked at the end of the podcast last time, which was, who do you think is going to win? And do you still stand by that decision? So let's go with you, Si. How are you feeling about your pick for the winner from part 1, the preview show? How's that going for you over there?
Well, I said at the end of the last one that I thought the podium guys from last year, Brabec, Price, and Quintanilla, would be there again this year, and they are thereabouts. They're all still in it. Obviously, Price is much better place, but I'm gonna go with my gut feeling from the last 7 years and say Barreda again. I think this is his year.
Okay, well, there's an interesting question to follow up that with, but what about you, Dad?
You just mentioned the word leadership at the start there. I think that's kind of quite an interesting one for this year, because with how things are playing out, and quite clearly for the first time in a few years, tactics coming back into it, and one thing there doesn't seem to be anywhere much is any kind of leadership. It's been a bit chaotic, every man for himself. But yeah, I mean, for me, I suppose another really interesting thing is with Toby, I picked him at the start and he's leading on the rest day, and I'm still going to stick with him for the end. It was only a few years ago when we used to say, hey, whoever's leading on the rest day never wins the race. But actually, that's kind of changed a bit in the last few years, and there's been several riders that have led the rest day and then won. So, yeah, I'm sticking with Toby. I think the other great thing that Toby's got as an asset now, sadly for Matthias, but is Matthias Faulkner, because, you know, he's a great water boy all of a sudden. You know, he can be there if something happens to Toby and Sam. He is there. And, you know, that will be his role now, and they have got a situation where they can really play the team card. I mean, it's an easy thing to say, but if you look at Faulkner's time now, I think he's 2 minutes and 10 off the lead when he was stopped for 2.5 hours in the desert.
Yep.
Interesting game to play.
Yeah, you can. I mean, that's always it's a complicated and easy cop-out thing to say, but it has some place, right? I mean, he's clearly, obviously, we know he's not a mug on a motorbike. So, okay, I think the best way to deal with this is to sort of work through the order of the leaderboard, because I think at this point of the rally, quite often in the past, we have also had no idea at this point of the rally how it's going to shape up, and dramatic things always happen in the second week. People go out, bikes explode, and so on. But I don't think even in recent years where the leaderboard has been wide open, it's been this close at this point of the race, and also this unknown with so much, you talked about it already, tactics going on where the leadership changes dramatically every single day because the riders leading out are really struggling to navigate. So firstly, I think the rules and the changes that have been brought about might be having a little bit of an effect here. So how much for you two do you think not having the road book before the event, maybe not having map men before each stage, is affecting their ability to lead out and navigate well? One of you. We'll give go. What about you, Dad? You have more experience of this than any of us, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a whole massive subject, isn't it? You know, last year they were all very happy about the thing of just getting their road book just beforehand. There's definitely been a few more comments about it from the lead riders that it is difficult for them this year. You know, like you just said, it's been a game changer in many years, and it's not necessarily a case of the navigation being difficult all day or every day. In fact, a bunch of them have said today the navigation wasn't difficult and it was just a 200-kilometre motocross race. Whereas yesterday there was these sort of situations where the navigation was particularly difficult. I mean, if you think the year Faulkner won it in the second week, that's exactly what happened, was that there was one place where the navigation was difficult and he got it right and no one else did. Well, apart from Van Beveren, who then had a little lie down. You know, so it can be that is just like as much as one particular box. And you know, the talk on the internet, we weren't there, it's very hard to know, but the talk on the internet yesterday was about this kind of one particular box that they all struggled to find. And when I looked at it, and I looked, you know, there was lots of video of what people were doing wrong at that point and compared it to the note in the road book, which is so easy when you're sat in a couch and you can watch the replay 20 times and work it out. It's obviously not the same as arriving there at 100 mile an hour and trying to make the decision on the spur of the moment. But to me, it looked like there was too much information in that one box, and it should have been two boxes. It was actually like two instructions put into one box, which, as we know, it's often the case. You know, that is sometimes what makes it difficult. But I noticed on a few little things I found on the internet this afternoon that was actually a comment from a couple of the lead riders that, individual boxes are too complicated this year. So I don't think it's necessarily getting the road book just beforehand that's the sole difficulty. And also I think, the other thing, which I'm sure we'll talk about separately, is, the fact that the field is so stacked. When a few years ago, when it was only 2 or 3 guys that could run that pace, they had time to have a little technical problem or a navigational thing where they slowed down to solve the navigational problem, or even went the wrong way for a little bit, and they were still the fastest guy. But now, as soon as they make a small error or slow down a little bit, it's like there's 15 guys riding that pace. So suddenly it just turns everything on its head, because so many can ride that fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that point is 100% reflected in, like you say, in that daily yo-yo that we had in the first 4 days before someone decided that Dakar was actually a race with some tactics in it that seems to have been lost in the last few years. But also in the fact that the top, I'm just looking at the current standings right now, Van Beveren is 15th. He's 34 minutes back. And in years past, we've seen that kind of gap between like first and second. Do you know?
Yeah, and we've also sat here at every rest day in the last few years and said anyone that's within 45 minutes or even an hour of the lead can still win this thing. But this year, that means, what are we, to get an hour back off the lead, we're talking 18th place.
Yeah. And I hate to break it to Martin Michek, but
He ain't winning.
He's not winning. I don't even know how good a rider he is, but he's not winning. And so, okay, I think that neatly brings us to the Brabec situation, which, well, that was an interesting process. So, obviously the race started with 2 Honda riders doing really well one day, Brabec and Barreda, Toby Price doing really well the next day. And this yo-yo going on where they were kind of swapping big gaps of time, 20, 25 minutes, 20, 25 minutes. And then on day 4, Ricky Brabec, we were talking about this on WhatsApp, and I think I said to you both, I think something's got to change here. Like, someone is going to have to break this cycle. The next day, Brabec comes out and deliberately backs off, drops 8 minutes on Barreda in a half a stage. Barreda wins it. Brabec comes like 18th. And you have this situation where he's not the only one, right? Like, Sam has done the same thing, and he's come out and said it. And I think I said this to you guys and in my like little Instagram updates, that there's 2 things that I found really interesting about this. The first one is, I don't ever remember, and maybe you've got a bit more insight into this, Dad, but I don't ever remember in the era of Dakar becoming tactical. I wasn't particularly detail orientated on this subject. I was more just blown away by people riding through the desert. But I don't ever remember anyone coming out and talking about tactics in a public way. And that was like really interesting to me. The whole point of tactics is that you're making decisions and keeping your cards close to your chest. And 3 of the top riders, Quintanilla, Sam, and Brabec, all made the same decision on the same day, that they were going to decide roughly where they were going to finish that day. And then they told everyone about it. So what's going on there? And what do you think the net result of that has been?
I think Brabec just did that because he's American and brash and doesn't give a shit about anything. and yeah, it was a bold call. Unfortunately, he got that nav wrong the next morning, so he lost a lot of time. So it didn't really pay off for him, and that's kind of why he finds himself where he is now. And but obviously not that far down, but it's not
far
where
enough.
He wants to be in the rest day. Yeah, far enough. Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to like the other riders what like Brabec, Sunderland, Quintanilla were doing, and the fact that they said publicly what it was, I don't think it bears too much difference, because like everyone that matters, like all the people in the race and stuff, like the team managers will know and will be telling their riders what's going on and what other riders are doing and how to combat that. So yeah, public with it is pretty bold, but yeah, I don't think it makes too much difference to the outright kind of like what's going to happen, you know.
I love what Barreda, I don't know if you saw Bareda's interview today, but I love what he said today. He said something like, I slowed down to be tactical, but then I won anyway.
So I've got a theory about Barreda that I haven't put to you two, because most of what Barreda is doing at the moment seems counterintuitive, and I think this is a nice little segue into the fact that he is quite clearly this year one of, if not the fastest guy. He is on a roll. 3 stage wins, is it, in 6 days? Like, an amazing performance, riding super well. He's also, I believe, onto his 4th rear tyre, which is another conversation entirely, but quite clearly tactical riding isn't something that's in his repertoire. It never has been. You know, he's never had the ability to shut off when he should have. It's led to big crashes and broken bikes and incredible rides, all of the above. It's been like fantastic as a spectator to have him in this race. But maybe his contract is just based on stage wins. You know, maybe he only gets paid if he wins stages. This is a joke, obviously, but like, he's going home a rich man if that's the case. Because he clearly doesn't care about having enough tyres to last the second week.
No, but I don't know, again, you know, we don't know who's bluffing who here, but he, in his press release today, he said he's back on the game with the tyres. They reused an old tyre, and he's only used 3 now. He's got 3 left for the second half.
Yeah, because you can cycle through your own tyres as many times as you want.
And maybe, you know, I've never put him as a winner, but like Sai's obviously been a massive fan for ages, and maybe the press has finally got to him, because he's got this what's the word, ignominious distinction at the moment. He's on 27 wins, equaling the great Jordi Arcarons for stage wins,
and
I don't know,
and
second or
there's
third
got to
ever.
be most stage wins without winning a race.
Like Jordi Arcarons, 20 never won it. So maybe he's just decided, hey, I better bloody win this thing.
But the one difference between those two is Arcarons at least came close. You know, at this point,
numerous times,
without being mean about Barreda, he hasn't even come close yet. You know, he's been amazing, but like, he's never put it on the podium. So anyway, I think the interesting thing about Barreda is he's also in maybe a little bit of a tricky position. His overall isn't bad. He's 6 minutes back, but he leads out. And I think at this point, the one thing that has become really apparent to all the riders is if you're leading out, that is not a good position to be in. Like, it's almost a race to avoid winning a stage, do you know?
Well, except that, you know, that forever was the case a few years ago, and then one of the people that solved that was Barreda. You know, he knows he can do it. He just needs the right stage, and like today, you know, it obviously wasn't such a problem today. You know, the guys that let out did still lose a bit of time, but a bit more like the old school where they just lost their 3 minutes, you know, not this 20-minute thing. So, you know, the second half, many times the second week in Dakar has turned the first week's form book on its head. So it doesn't take much, does it? It just takes one day where a Barreda or a Price leads out from the front and still wins that day, and like that can be the game.
So along that same line of it turning the form book on its head, when you look at the leaderboard, the top 10 is full of people you would not typically expect to be there. or not in the order that they are, and not to have been having the rides that they're having. The first on that list, without a doubt, is Conejo Florimo. I'm not like he's a good rider, and he's been on the Honda team for quite a few years now. He's still pretty young, but he's third overall and only 3 minutes off the lead. He's shown that he has enough speed to win a stage. So do you think he can still be there in a week's time?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, that again.
Pretty much, yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, yeah, he led, he navigated from the front most of yesterday and today as well, and yeah, we've heard a few riders kind of sing his praises about his navigating, and obviously he rides well. He's consistent. He's finished the past 2 editions. I don't know if he finished the one before that, and yeah, he's just be kind of slowly building, improving, maturing. He's still a young guy, and yeah, he's there now. He's a contender.
So he has finished 4 in a row, including
Better than
last year 2 stage wins.
It's a good bit of experience in the bank, that, isn't it?
Decent indeed.
I mean, none of the other Honda guys have finished the last 4 years. Like all of them.
No, that's a very good point. So the one rider in front of him, in second place overall at the moment, is Benavides, which I think, other than we talked about in the preview show, maybe his head having been broken a little bit by some really bad crashes, he's a great rider. He's won lots of stages. He's shown great speed, and clearly he's in good form this year. He won a stage yesterday with a broken nose. I don't know that those two things are together, but he won yesterday's stage. He's second overall. He's in a really good position. So I think it kind of goes without saying that none of us would be surprised if he was on the podium at the end of the week. And one thing we were talking about yesterday, Dad, is when you watched all the footage of the lead riders riding through the dunes in that pack yesterday, you can really tell through people's riding style and how anxious and excited they ride, how maybe their riding level is and how comfortable they are riding the pace that those other guys are riding. And one of the things you pointed out was that Daniel Sanders looks really good, but more importantly is the 4th place rider, Yamaha's number 1 guy at the moment, Ross Branch. He was second today. He's 4th overall, and again, just a couple of minutes back, 3:41. So how close do you think he is to a top 5 finish at the end of the race, to being comfortable in that position, to maybe scoring a podium or Yamaha's best result in a really long time? Or is it a case of he's a little bit too on the edge?
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I watch his riding, I feel that. I feel like he's obviously an incredible rider, but compared to the style of a Sam, a Toby, or a Chucky, Daniel Sanders, like, they look so measured and in control and like technically good, whereas he looks to me a little bit like he's like hanging on to their speed. And hey, it's very hard to say that from the armchair again, because the guy's going damn fast, and maybe he's just got a bit of a loose style, but that's how it looks to me.
So I think my other question within this bracket then is, do you think the bike plays into that? Because he is significantly far and away, and you've got a Yamaha site. It's not a factory bike, but it is close. Do you think the bike plays into this at all? Because he's nearly 40 minutes. He's nearly more than half an hour. I'll get my words out correctly. In front of Van Beveren, who has been the number 1 Yamaha guy for years and years and years and years, and an incredible rider. No one questions that. And the third rider on the Yamaha team at the moment, Franco Kaimi, and the other two Yamahas have gone home for controversial and not controversial reasons. So is this a case of Branch's bike is like a bit sketchy to ride and he's riding the wheels off it? Is it a case of he's a bit sketchy and he's riding the wheels off himself? Or is he just a bit loose and it's all fine? In the same way that former Yamaha rider de Sautrey is clearly loose as a goose, but seems to be fine.
I think Branch finds himself on the leaderboard just because he just racked up those kind of good stage finishes, like between 3rd and 10th, around there. And like him, the Sautrey, Sunderland, they're all being the same, just doing the same thing. I don't know if it's down to the bike. I think it's just down to Branch being consistent. Van Beveren's issues, he got lost yesterday morning, I think it was, and lost like half hour, something like that. That's why he finds himself there. But for him, like he said on social media, like to be in, like, sort of in the game at the rest day is a massive win for him. After 2018, that massive crash, going to hospital, 2019 heartbreak, mechanical, 2 stages to go in the top 3, and then last year another massive crash, being in the hospital. So yeah, Van Beveren will be gutted for sure to be down there, but at the same time he'll be happy to just be in the game at this stage,
So here's a question for you, Si. Just I was just thinking about that whole kind of tactics of in the past, when it has been tactical, guys have kind of chosen their stage to try and attack and make the difference. And that's always been based on the information from the organisers about the detail of the route. And for those of you that don't know, in the past, we've always at Scrutineering kind of been given this quite detailed book, really, that lays out a lot of information about the route of each day. And, this year everything's being done for the competitors through the competitors app. And I can't seem to see that information lying around. And I don't know if we've spoken to anyone out there and if they have still been given that book and that kind of stuff. But I just wonder if that's also part of the problem, that they actually don't really know enough detail about what's coming, in 4 days' time.
Yeah, last year, I don't remember getting any information like that. No books, no kind of like heads up as to what was coming, only kind of like hearsay from people. And just looking at the map, at the kind of terrain that the course is going through, like obviously if you're going through the empty quarter, you're going to have some dunes. If you're going through the Neom region, it's going to be rocky canyons. You can tell that just from Google Earth. So, yeah, I don't think they. Well, I certainly didn't get any information like that last year, and I haven't seen much this year apart from what the organizers have written on the route page on the website. But yeah, that's pretty kind of generic information, really.
And that nice little graph they put on the website, which breaks down the percentage of terrain. I've been quite impressed by
exactly.
how they know that. They must have some good mapping software people. So the other kind of big news from week one, and I think there's a few things that have slipped under the radar here. Firstly, Skylar Howes was leading the race a few days ago. He's now in 9th place, but very much still in contention. There is no doubt he is, I think, a bit like Ross Branch. This is a bit of a seminal year for both of those two riders, really. Skylar was the first privateer, I think, in a long time to also lead the race. I struggled to think of the last one that I can remember that wasn't on a factory team. Maybe the Yamaha team before it was like a proper effort. And then, yeah, we also had the same thing the following day with De Sautre, who is clearly showing that. I think at this point, I don't know how you feel about it. In the years past between us three, he's been a bit of a joke, and not because he's not a great rider, but because he is like quite clearly got the wildest riding style in the top 50 riders in Dakar. He looks at any moment like he's about to explode, and just occasionally, sadly, he really does explode. It seems like
Go
on.
No, I was just going to say he got Wheelie Wednesday right today on a Friday though, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I mean, for all his wild riding style, you got to love the guy. He looks amazing.
Amazing, and I think that maybe the change of bike, or he's a little bit older, a little bit better, but it seems like there's maybe 10% less wild. That photo from a few years ago of him and Van Beveren going off the backside of the same dune, and he was in like panic rev, hang off the back mode, that seems to have gone a little bit. It's still there. We saw him almost have a really big crash jumping off the back of a dune just yesterday, but he is in an incredible position. And again, he is, for most, essentially a privateer. He's on a part of the HT Rally Raid Husky team, but that is the same setup that anyone can buy into, right? And I think that's such a cool thing that the bikes are that good that you can do that, and B, that these two riders are fighting with people who are basically having everything that they can be helped with. The other surprise for me, and it's kind of crept up, it seems like it crept out of nowhere, is Santolino on the Sherco in 8th place.
Yeah.
I think if you offered Sherco to only be 13 minutes off the lead at the start of this event, they'd have bitten your hand off for it. It's a long, they have won stages in the past, but he's totally crept up there. So the other question is, Si, and for you as well, Dad, do you think Brabec, in the position he's now in, where he starts the day after the rest day in 4th place, 20 minutes down, do you think that is too big of a gap for him to make up with all the depth that is in front of him, the people that can win this race?
I don't think it's too big of a gap, but he just needs to go from the morning of day 7. Like he's got to make a push now, just to get himself back into. I mean, starting 4th, he's going to have to push anyway. But like, he's got some great navigators that have been in front of him, and on the morning of stage 7, so he's got a good chance for sure. But definitely, he needs to start getting a move on.
So, one of the big topics of the last week, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, and a few bits have come out on social media about it, and especially even from the mouth of the riders, is that there's been a few stages there this year so far that have been monumentally fast. Like, in the history of Dakar speed, they have been monumentally fast. Do you think that is also having an effect on the daily results? And do you think it's dangerous? Do you think it's okay if the terrain is okay? What do you think?
Yeah, I've got a strong opinion about that for sure, because, that was one of the things for me that changed quite a lot when the rally moved from Africa to South America, and from, unanimously in the bike field, from the front of the field, to the back, the riders, everybody liked the South American stages, where they started to make it more technical, almost like halfway between enduro and rally. Like, as a rider, we all like going fast, but there's nothing better than going around a good corner and up and over, a technical hill sort of thing. And I think, from the enjoyment of the rally and the safety of the rally, I think that more technical riding is what it should be about. I think, going flat out is fun, but not all day. and yeah, I think it's dangerous. It's yeah. Don't know what else to say about it really. It seems like, and the organisers came out at the start with their, we spoke about it on the first podcast. All their new safety measures to try and sort of bring things back into line. And one of those safety measures was that they said they've designed the course in a way that it's slower speed and more technical, and then quite clearly hasn't been. Yeah, I don't like it.
Fair enough. So I think just to interlude that as well for those of you that haven't seen this information, I believe it was 2 days ago. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But it was a stage where Sam came out on his, or that you can measure the speed based on the stage distance versus the stage time. And then Sam came out on his Facebook, and basically the average speed for the day for the winner was 75 miles an hour. It was 128 kilometers an hour or whatever it is. A monumental speed. And then NASA Alatia's co-driver came out and said they have basically a way to measure how much percentage of throttle has been used and at what level across the day. And it was, I believe, 86% of the day was full throttle.
On a 200 kilometer an hour car.
Yeah. Mental. So what do you think about it, Si? Do you think it's kind of a situation that the riders should manage themselves, or do you think it comes down to the organisers to do something, or does it not really matter?
I think it comes down to the organisers for sure, because we're all racers, and everyone there is a racer, whether the top guy, mid pack, or whatever. Then if it's a big, fast straight or open plane and stuff like that, people are going to go flat out, and there's nothing you can do to stop them doing that. Apart from introducing speed limits and stuff like that. And yeah, and that's probably not what it's about really. But at the same time, in Saudi Arabia, it's a lot of big open plains, especially where they were in the first kind of 2, 3, 4 days before Riyadh. So, unless you have the rally just in those kind of mountainous areas and avoid the big deserts and stuff like that, then I don't see what you can really do.
So, Dad, when
they love navigation, so put more waypoints in and change cap headings.
Yeah.
Put artificial corners in. What a novel idea. So when the race was in Africa, obviously you did it however many times in Africa, 7 times, 6 times, something like that. Six African Dakars. What was that like? Were there stages there where it was monumentally quick all day and the average speed was really high and we just didn't really pay much attention to it? Was it a case of your bike wasn't actually quick enough to average 130 kilometers in a day, or across the board? What was the situation like? Has it changed?
Yeah, well, it was an era where things were changing quite a lot. Every year really. I was kind of also in that era when the factory guys had their big twins, and they were ridiculously fast, and there were places where they could go ridiculously fast. And as we all know, there was a lot of fatalities in that era for all sorts of reasons. And these are things that they worked hard to change to make it safer. And there is a compromise because, of course, going across the desert flat out is an amazing feeling, and it looks amazing on the helicopter. So there is a balance to be found there. But even those big twins, it's crazy, but they weren't any faster than the 450 singles are now. Those 450 singles, it's ridiculous. But, they will pull 170, 180 kilometers an hour on soft ground. So I think, yeah. And I think with those big bikes as they were, yes, they had this great top speed, but in that kind of little bit less than anywhere where it was complete billiard desert and safe to do so, they couldn't do it, So I'd be interested to have a look at that. I don't feel like the average speed was probably there. The guys are so good on those bikes now, and they're so capable of being near to their top speed in a lot of difficult terrain. So I think that's a little bit more the problem, is that you can do 150 kilometers an hour in quite technical terrain with the bikes as they are now. Mm-hmm. And that's more dangerous than going 200 kilometers an hour when you're on a motorway. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely different. And, it was part of the thing when it did go from Paris to Dakar. Most of the time, once we got into Morocco, after that, we were just heading 1,000 kilometers west every day. So there was a lot of fast, and there was a lot of straight line, and there was a lot of, like I said, that was a lot of what made the race as a competitor definitely more fun and enjoyable when we went to South America and we had to navigate more complex terrain. We didn't have those let's just head west all day. But I think the African desert was really complicated from that point of view, because you did have days where we had days where you were in dunes for 600 kilometers, not in a dune set and then out on a big wide open desert. So yeah, it's just a different era and a different mindset. And, always at the front of the field, like we've spoken about before, at the front edge of the field where those fast times were getting set, was much more a small handful of people that could ride those bikes that fast and that well. And this is the difference now, is that we've got, as we've been talking about, we've got 30 guys that can ride them that fast.
I suppose you touched on it a little bit there as well, but logistics when you're in a desert are significantly more difficult. I think that was one of the blessings for South America from the organisers' point of view, is that the road network was good. There is a way more populated place, much easier to make things happen. They had leapfrogging bivouacs essentially, and I think that maybe helped them make the course much more complicated, because they could go kind of wherever they wanted to go. It was easy to get there. They could always do it by road or good dirt road. Whereas I'm sure that experience for you, Si, this year, like last year, it was maybe a little bit more of, we're going to go in a direction we can go, because if you go too deep into the empty quarter, the desert, there's just nothing there. Like, you can't get the bivouac there. You can't get the medical crew there. And so that starts to cause a little bit of a problem. They had that problem last year with the bad wind and the day when one of the riders passed away and a bunch of others got hurt. They closed the stage early because it wasn't possible to keep going with the situation they had, so maybe that is something that they're always up against as well, with choosing that direction. Ultimately, Saudi is a big country, but it's a big empty country, which means there's not much there in between the bits where people are, if that makes sense. Anyway, so one of the other big points, it's cold in here, is the new safety rules we talked about, the airbags. I think universally the airbags seem to have gone down well. There's been reports of people having crashes and them going off and it being funny and them wandering around like Michelin men and then getting back on their bikes, and they're all okay. There's a few questions which are quite detailed about how the airbags work, which I don't know if either of you have any insight on the details of the technology being used and how it works.
We can give it a go.
So
what's the question?
One of the questions is from Bill Cagnacci. I hope I said that right, Bill. You are a top fan. How nice is that? Regarding the rider airbag, what stops it going off during a minor get-off? And if it does deploy, is that it? No more safety airbag?
There's nothing really stopping it going off for a minor get-off, but it's all down to the algorithm that Alpine Styles have been working on. It's not the same as the road going vision. They've apparently done a lot of testing with motocross riders and off-road riders in various disciplines to modify the algorithm for that kind of crash. In terms of resetting it, once the cartridge, the gas canister blows once, the gas canister can't be used again. So the riders, I think they're carrying one or two extra cartridges, and I believe there's extra cartridges available at the fuel stops. Because I'm guessing a lot of the vests use the same kind of cartridge.
So there are a couple of different systems as well. Most of the riders appear to be using the Alpine Star system. Neil is, all the Alpine Star sponsored riders are, and they've provided that through the organization, but a couple of other riders aren't. It was surprisingly hard before the race actually to find out which airbags are FIM homologated. And the most high profile rider is De Sautre. He's wearing a Furrigan branded airbag, which uses the in and motion technology. Do you know if the Alpine Star system is also using in and motion technology? This is a question we've got here.
I have no idea, but I'm guessing with a brand like Alpine Stars, it's probably just all in-house stuff.
Okay. Because De Sautre's one seems to work fine as well. It's not just exploding for no reason when he rides off a bump really hard. So
I think there's 6 approved, eh?
Is there? Yeah. It may be an IXS one. But
Climb.
Okay, I didn't know there was
Headlight.
a Climb one. The Headlight one.
Yep.
The Headlight one's been around for a little while, hey?
Yeah, a few riders are using that. Yeah.
So the other kind of 2 quite major events that happened in the leader group in the last week are Matthias Volkner with the clutch situation. Has there been any more information other than it was quite clear that his clutch was very burnt out?
I haven't seen anything, but it's strange that it was burnt out because it was like right at the start of the stage. So you'd think that they'd be checking that the night before or something like that. But yeah, it was pretty early on.
Have you heard?
No, I haven't seen anything either, but it was definitely like Si said, it was pretty bizarre because it looked totally toast.
Yeah, or almost like it had been slipping, or someone's put the wrong oil in, or something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is definitely some little mistake happened in the KTM team there, which is very unlike them. And the other thing that seemed crazy to me was that he didn't appear to have a spare plate, which, I've never seen a factory bike without a spare clutch plate zip tied to the back of the fan or somewhere. I mean, I learned that trick from them. It just seems crazy that he didn't have that and he had to wait for, a privateer in 100th place to give him the clutch plate. Crazy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Or even that he didn't just. It's easy to say this from our position, but to just snap one and make it fixed drive.
Yeah. Well, when he put the extra plate in, that's all he ended up with anyway. He said that. He said he had a fixed drive for the rest of the day, which again is incredible that someone can ride it. Pretty much once he got going again, he was on the same split times as the front runners all day without being able to pull the clutch in. Awesome.
So I don't know if you saw this
Probably
as well.
made him go faster.
Yeah.
Probably made him go faster.
I don't know if you saw. Stay off the clutch. It's like that scene in what was that Dust to Glory film where he's got it duct taped on the inside of his handguard. Stay off the clutch. For any of you that haven't seen that film, dig it out. Go and watch it. What a great film that is. Also, Sam lost his back brake yesterday and still had a superb day, which is, to me, in sand dunes, is incomprehensible. Yeah. I don't know how you ride even vaguely quickly. You can see the helicopter footage of them. They're always on the back brake as soon as they're in those sand dunes. It's their little safety, like a safety rudder. I don't know how you ride that fast without one. It's incredible. So the other one, and it seemed like this got like just swept under the rug. It happened, and everyone moved on. Was Jamie's bike. It just gave up, and he walked out of the desert, got in a helicopter, and no one said anything more. Like Yamaha just pretended it didn't happen. So I don't know if you saw anything else, heard anything else, but that was another question, actually from your dad, Si.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen anything else. I'm in touch with Jamie, so I might ask him at some point. But yeah, could be anything, can it? I mean, yeah, the fact that they were changing pistons so often in past years and this year, maybe that has something to do with it. But you just don't know. You can't speculate about stuff like that. But yeah, it's a strange one for sure.
And so also in the Yamaha team, they've not had a lot of luck, was the Andrew Short issue, which I think raises two questions, which are different questions. The first one is from someone else. I saw it in the comments. Now I've lost it. But basically, was the situation with the fuel something that they could have foreseen from previous years? And then along the same lines, do you think they should have kind of heeded Yamaha's request to basically what Yamaha asked them to cut the previous stage at CP2 and let Andrew Short back into the race, because ultimately the water in the fuel issue was their fault, not Yamaha's fault, and they've basically cost him the race?
I don't blame ASO for turning down that request. Really, I think it opens a massive can of worms. As much as I love Andrew Short, and I am a Yamaha rider, but yeah, they let, if they cancel half the stage just to let one guy back in, I think that it sets a precedent that they don't want to deal with in the future.
Oh,
that was over to you. I was doing that momentary pause to let someone else speak.
Everything disappeared. I didn't know where it all gone. Yeah, it was Paul, the legendary Paul Catchpole, that asked that question.
Indeed.
And I agree with Si. I think the organisers can't go, cutting stages to let a rider back in no matter what's happened, because, yeah, that's an impossible scenario to deal with. Really super unfortunate, obviously, for Andrew Short, and I'm the same. Been a massive fan of his from when he was racing Supercross onwards, and love the fact that a guy like that now
the internet. Sorry there. We've had a technical drama. I don't know whether it came from you or Si or me. It's probably most likely me. We might just have to wait a sec because Si's dropped off the call. He's
really?
Back. You're back. Boom. All right, we're back in business.
I can see you both and hear you both. So.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Paul's question is: should the teams have expected it? Well, I think that's a much more complicated question. I think that's Dakar. Is the job is to expect everything and anything. That's why it's the biggest, baddest adventure race in the world, and stuff that you can't predict is gonna happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as fascinating as it is. It wouldn't be, it would just be a motocross race. So, water in the fuel, it's definitely something that's happened many times over the years. Right back to, you asked me about racing in Africa, it was all the time for sure. So yes, but of course it's very, very difficult to diagnose those things when they do happen. Shorty said, I kind of figured that what had happened was, when you refuel on the specials, and even sometimes at the beginning and the end of the day, how it works in Dakar is the organisers have taken I don't know how many, 50, 44-gallon drums, maybe more. It's the whole field full of 44-gallon drums that they've taken out to the desert and dumped there a day or two before. And when you pull up with your bike, you go to the next 44-gallon drum, and there's two or three or four guys there with handheld pumps, and they're pumping that fuel drum out into your bike. And then when that fuel drum runs out, they take the handheld pump out and stick it in the next one. So, those fuel drums are fueled up wherever they're fueled up, and, someone's got to put the lid back on them, and the fuel that they're filling from might be a bit rubbish anyway, but then they're these old 44-gallon drums, and, if someone leaves the lid off and there's a rainstorm, there's some water in it, there's a million things that can go wrong with that fuel by the time it gets to your bike. And that's why, that's one of the reasons why these days everyone's got 2 fuel pumps on their bikes and, fuel filters. And I know the last couple of times we raced, we were changing our fuel filters every night, just precautionary, because, if you get shit in your fuel, it's game over, or can be game over. When it happened to him, the photos we saw it was a crazy amount of water in the fuel. But again, in the stress of when that happens and your bike stops in the desert and it's you on your own trying to troubleshoot that problem, it's a very difficult thing to troubleshoot. It's super easy to troubleshoot that when you get back in the workshop or you're watching it on the internet and you go, oh, look, there's loads of fuel in his water. Why didn't he drain that out and put fresh fuel in and start again? But, I know one time it took me 45 minutes to work out when my bike completely stopped in the dunes, and it took me 45 minutes to work out that the fuel tap was off, because you just get stressed in that scenario.
Yeah.
And there's other bikes coming past, and you've got this pressure on your head of, I've got to fix it now. So, yeah. Should they expect it? Yes, they should expect everything. How hard is it to solve it when it does go wrong? Incredibly hard. But that's why Sai's point at the beginning is right, is that you can't then go, well, he should go back in the race, because the other argument is he should have spotted it and fixed it in 5 minutes and carried on.
So on that same point you just made, factory riders, when things go wrong, not putting in the same effort, maybe someone, and it's hard to say with Jamie, because you don't know what happened to his bike. If a piston blows up, it's pretty fucking hard to get out of that situation. Excuse my French. But like, if it's a fuel problem, do you think he should have maybe put more time into figuring out what that problem was and dismantled his bike and tried to solve it? Or do you think as a factory rider, it's just not worth that much? How do you feel about that? Because you can quite imagine, I suppose my point comes, you can quite imagine someone in 70th place, if they get a bike full of water and fuel, that they're going to spend all night trying to figure out what it is before they give up. So that's kind of my question, really, is...
It kind of depends on the rider, I guess, a bit. I mean, if Andrew Shaw had the same problem that Walken had, would he have spent that time fixing it,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if Walken had the same situation as Andrew Short had, would he have been able to figure it out?
Yeah.
So we'll never know that kind of stuff, but I think it just comes down to the rider as well. And we don't know how long Andrew Short was there with his bike. He could have been there for hours. He could have been there for 20 minutes, kind of thing. So, yeah.
So I love Andrew Short, but I'm going to go the other way and disagree, because for me, Dakar is back to that thing. It's supposed to be an adventure race. It's supposed to be the hardest thing out there. And, I don't care if you're a factory rider or a privateer. You've heard plenty of factory riders say that their goal is to get that finisher's medal. And you should do whatever you can do to get in that situation. And for those factory riders as well, if they do get going again, they can be a great support for their team for the rest of the time. And there's been many, many, many stories, even into recent times, of some factory guys that have pulled out all the stops to stay in the race when things have gone wrong. Cyril won the race after changing his engine himself on the marathon stage a couple of years ago. Got him the win. Goncalves, bless him, before he passed away last year, stayed, pulled his engine out, waited for the truck, put a new engine in when the truck turned up, 6-7 hours.
There was quite a legendary situation with Barreda in 2015 as well. Towed 400 kilometers.
And the rest.
Plus.
That was mental.
A couple of years earlier with Matt Fish as well. Shame we didn't see more of him.
Yes. Matt Fish, legend. How far did he push his bike out the canyon and then got towed the rest of the way?
It was like kilometers.
And man, if that Sand Canyon that he pushed through, I could hardly ride through it with my engine running. Guys, beast. So I think... And, hey, it wasn't that long ago where the rule was if you had a mechanical, you had to stay in the desert overnight. If you press the button, if you press the emergency button and it wasn't for a medical emergency, you got fined some ridiculous amount of money and you got suspended from Dakar for 3 years. That used to be the rule.
Wow.
You wouldn't be pushing that button very often, would you?
Yeah. So,
But I suppose that now in hindsight, maybe that changed in South America a little bit, because leaving people in a hot desert is a really, really bad idea.
It was a really bad idea. There's no question about it. I'm just saying that. That was the rule.
I'm quite glad they've changed that one, because if it was me sat there with an exploded engine wondering how the hell to solve that situation, I'd really like at some point to know that someone was going to pick me up. You don't want to wait there. For me that would be a massive motivation to find a way out. But if there was no way out, it'd suddenly become a really terrifying situation. So we've got a couple of other questions here.
Ask Patsy about it.
So the question, the first part is pretty simple. The second part is pretty complicated. Is there much difference in tyre wear on different terrain? And is that part of Barreda's strategy?
Short answer, yes, there is different tyre wear on different kind of terrain. I mean, you guys know more than me about this kind of stuff, but yeah, on like a stonier, hard packed terrain, the tyres will wear quicker, and then sandy kind of terrain they wear slower. I'd say they'll have mostly sandy terrain. Well, the last 2 days have been super sandy. They should have sand again the next 2 days, and then a lot of kind of stones and hard pack then to Jeddah. So yeah.
And I would add to that I think as well that you need good tyres. They wear out much quicker. You need good tyres more on the hard pack rocky ground as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would argue that you can use a pretty worn tyre in the dunes, and the difference is much more, not nothing, but more negligible. So this is probably more of an opinion thing. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Are Yamaha going to change pistons and take the time penalty? Do you think all the teams are going to take that, or do you think with how close the race is, that they're going to take the risk like they did a few years ago when a piston change was a time penalty? They're going to take the risk of not doing it.
I think they are allowed one, aren't they?
I might be wrong on the rules. I'll quickly check them. But I thought that they were down to every piston change was a 15-minute penalty. But I will quickly check the rules while you two talk about it.
Yeah, my recollection is that there's one allowed, and then it's 10 minutes for the first one, and then I think it goes up per change after that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to download the rule book while I ask you the next question. No, I'm not, because the rule book has utterly disappeared off their website. Okay.
That's handy.
I'll
I
get
wonder
back
which
to you.
has stolen it.
It was
That'd be a
in
good tactic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Steal the row book, get the old PDF reader out, reread it, and repost it.
It was just on the website. Here we go. All right, regulations. That's the one we need. So, what else have we got? Does Toby Price's mullet make him go faster? And this is a little bit of a hedge question. While I know if anyone ever listens to Joe Rogan's podcast, his man Jamie is the fastest guy in the world at finding information, and I am the opposite of that.
Yes, it does make him faster.
Proven fact,
Obviously,
isn't it?
he's winning.
He's winning.
There's about 80 people behind him without mullets, and then he's in the front with a mullet. Therefore,
So, if that's the case, what about Daniel Sanders' glorious haircut?
He's working up to it, isn't he?
yeah, it's getting there. It's working its effect. Yeah, by the end it'll be winning stages for sure.
Okay,
On that basis, the podium becomes Toby, Daniel Sanders, and De Sautre.
Yeah.
so
And then Neil Hawker in fourth.
They're all green fourth. Absolutely.
we've got some clarity on the Piston situation. So, first Piston is a freebie. You have to tell the organisers you've done it. Then a penalty of 10 minutes per additional piston. Any change of engine is a 15-minute penalty for the first one, 45 for the second, and then every engine after that is 2 hours. If you're on your third engine, you've probably got bigger problems. Mostly your empty bank balance is an issue. There we go.
I do know a privateer that obviously that rule's been in there for a little while. I do know a privateer that did 5 and got a finisher's medal. And he was doing Malmoto.
No.
So
the legendary Kemal.
Legend.
So my last question, last two questions. The first one, do you have a dream destination for the race? Somewhere you really think it should be going, or you would like to see it go?
So, over to you.
Well, I think Silkway Rally. That's the one.
That already exists.
It already exists. Yep, that's the one for me. I think it's that whole Russia. It's this year. It's going to go Russia, Mongolia, and China. But that whole kind of area through there, when we did it 10 years ago, absolutely fantastic for a lot of the same reasons as South America. We then end up with multiple countries, and we end up with a lot of different kinds of terrain over the 2 or 3 weeks. And that's obviously doesn't work for Dakar because it doesn't work in January.
So, well, depends how Russian you are. I don't think those Kamaz have any problem.
No.
So, my last question to both of you, really. What surprised you most about this year's rally so far?
That's a good question. I guess.
Thank you.
I guess how many people are still kind of still in it, and anyone in the top 15 can. Well, some maybe not, but most of the people in the top 15 can still win it and still get on the podium. I thought we'd maybe get a couple of the superstars kind of stretch out a bit, but that hasn't really happened so far. So it's a good thing. Obviously, it's super exciting, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I think a pretty low DNF rate so far as well. I was talking to Si about it the other day.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that's changed a lot for me in the time I've been involved is bikes are so good and so reliable now. It is such a surprise to us when there's a mechanical like Jamie's or Matthias's, and that's when I was first doing it, you expected from the start that a third of the field was going home through mechanicals and a third of the field was going home in the helicopter injured, and the rest was the finish, and now it's like it's pretty hard. The mechanical DNFs are very small, and I don't know how many have gone out so far this year, but it seems like very few.
So I believe it is currently 20. There are 81 people still in the race.
Yeah, and there's a few of those that have timed out, and a few mechanicals I know of. But yeah, the high finish rate is interesting.
Indeed, it is. Well, they've got to finish. We've got to get to the finish this year. But normally the adage of 50% finish rate doesn't seem particularly realistic. It's hard to imagine at this point with 80 people still in the race that only 50 will be there at the end. But
yeah.
So that is probably it. I don't have any more questions. I think I've run out of things to ask about. So do you two have any questions that you want to ask? If the answer is no, then I'll just move swiftly on and we'll close this up.
Why don't we get supplied with beer, boss?
Boss, A, not boss, and B, because I'm many miles away from you. That's why. You're adults, and there's a cost cutter at the end of your street that sells beer. It was very tasty.
I'll remember
that. My dad asked a good question on my page the other day. After all, like a 250, 300, 400k liaison in the morning, how do you get warmed up or kind of prepped for going into a stage?
I would say that maybe I'm a bit different to other people, but by the time that happens, the stage and the liaison have blended into one thing, and I'm just riding. I'm cold and I'm tired, and I've just eaten sausage and beans from a vacuum pack for the 10th day in a row. This is now at this point I'm just riding. The special stage versus racing bit is gone.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think early on in the race, you just have that in there a little bit when you touched on it earlier, when you're a bit of a racer kind of person and you're competitive. They're quite clever at this. With the lead riders, they put a nice big gap between them to stretch them out, and with the rest of us, to make us race a bit harder, they put us all together on the start line every morning, and it's guaranteed to make someone go fast, isn't it?
Yep.
When you start 4 abreast, you definitely get more excited than you do when you're trying to figure it out on your own.
Pretty much.
What about you, Dad?
No, I think you've nailed the whole thing on the head, and especially in the second week, it's very true.
I think mainly as well, my experience with that race and with other rallies is that as a privateer, the predominant thing that I cared about most of the time was dust and how I could not be in other people's dust. So if that meant I had to turn the throttle to get away from someone or pass them to not be in their dust, I would rather do that. Because the worst situation for me is when you are quicker than someone, but then you just end up sat on the edge of their dust cloud the whole time. That's a little bit sketchy. Because you do just edge into it all the time or whatever. So if you're in that situation, you want to get out of it as quick as possible. Sorry, go on.
No, there's a few people commented today about the liaison after the rally, after the special as well. And like that's another kind of good point, because you come out the special and then sometimes you still have this long liaison. And sometimes that liaison can be dirt as well afterwards. And like a few of them were saying how cold they got after the special because they haven't got their warm clothes with them anymore. They've dumped them at the start of the special.
I mean,
kind of like
that's probably the difference between a factory rider and a privateer, because if it was me, I'd have had that jacket somewhere.
Yeah.
I'd have been like, this is coming with me.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think you worry, when you're less worried about winning, you worry more about looking after yourself and surviving. Yeah. I don't know what that was like for you, Si, but I imagine you probably carried your waterproof jacket with you constantly the whole time.
Yeah, so I had a heated base layer, the Evade that we all use and love. We had that and a thin waterproof jacket. I'd often start the specials with those as well, and then first time I had to stop for a pee, I ditched the one of them, whatever I had time to do, given dust and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I always carried them with me for sure, and for that exact reason, for the liaison at the end as well. Some specials I kept the waterproof on and under my jacket for the whole day, because it's just never warmed up enough to take it off, So
well,
so
when
yeah,
you're moving,
layering.
when you're moving fast in a stage, it has to be quite physical to combat the fact that the wind chill is high, right? I'm sure you've had this as well, but even up to 25 degrees, if you're doing 130 kilometers an hour just in a jacket and shirt, it's cold. It quickly wicks the heat out of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got one more question that has just popped up on Patreon from Ray Stradonsky, our biggest Patreon Dakar fan by a long way. So today's stage was shortened by 100 kilometers, and there was a little joke on our little WhatsApp group about this whenever it was this morning, because my first reaction was, personally, as a fan, I was like, that's shit, it should be hard. And then immediately my memory went back to how pleasant it was whenever they give you a little reprieve like that. And I imagine this morning 81 riders got up and went, oh, that's nice. That makes my life a little bit easier. Very different perspectives. But more the question that Ray has asked is about today's stage was designed to take riders through dunes from all different directions and approaches. And this has been something that we talked about privately as being, I think, a little bit controversial, actually, the last couple of years. So can you describe a little bit what it's like when you come at dunes from different angles and how that affects the approach and what the end result of all of that is, physically, safety-wise, and so on?
You got that, Si?
Yeah, I thought you were talking to you, though.
No. You are the Dune King.
Oh, okay.
Man, if anyone can get a G650 through 700 kilometers of dunes, they know more about riding dunes than I ever will.
Yeah, okay. Well, it is a good question, because it is very, very different which way the dunes are lying, for sure. They're arguably a little bit easier when you're going up the slack side and down the slip face, because you don't have to get over the dune. But for sure, it's more dangerous that way around. And again, it depends a little bit on the speed. And I think when they've been dangerous is when you have the kind of dune field where it's a big plane between each blade of dune. So you get a lot of speed off the slip face. You can pull a couple of gears going down the slip face, and then you're running across a plane, and then maybe you're back in top gear, and you quickly lose your feeling of how fast you're going. And then you come up on the slip faces, tend to be very blind then, and have that little kicker in front of them that you can see from a distance. So yeah, that's when people go sailing off the blind side of the dune. And then the base of those kind of dunes is always almost like concrete when you come off the slip face. So if you do go off too hot and don't actually land in the slip face, land on the bottom, it's a very, very hard impact. So they're kind of more dangerous that way around.
But when they're like that, that situation you're talking about, is that when the dune isn't really that big? We've seen a couple of instances, and it's hard to know with the TV how much of the dunes are this big, but we've seen a bit of footage, and you talked about it last year, Si, with some of the dunes being monumentally big, like Ergchebi big, South America big. So then how does that relationship start to change with the direction that you're running the dunes?
And once they're a certain size that way around, you have to go down the slip face because you're just not able to get up. Or that's when the navigation becomes difficult because you have to roll off the cap and go one way or the other to find a place where you can crest the dune. So then you have to average out your cap because you can't go in a straight line anymore. So that kind of adds to the navigation a little bit. But yeah, it depends whether you're in like a dune field or like I described it before, where you've got the plain between the dunes. Because when you're in just completely in a dune field, like I don't think it matters too much which way you're running. Like that's sort of when they're really fun, when they're soft and there's all different shapes to the dunes, and you have to get your head up and use your head to pick a line and run the blades when you can and run the valleys when you can, and then just choose a nice place to cross. And like that's kind of super fun and super safe to me. And then it doesn't matter. It's just when you've got those planes in between them, I think that's when I feel like they're dangerous. Because when you're in a dune set and you've got all those kind of blades, even when they're quite big dunes, like a lot of the time when they're real big dunes, in front of the slip face, you get a small little kicker, so you can see that from distance and you can brake on the hard dune and then power into the little blade. And that's when you get all those beautiful rooster tails and guys just doing nice little jumps off the top of them, because it becomes kind of quite readable and quite predictable then, as against when you're like in top gear and then suddenly there's nothing on the backside. And where it gets, I think the scenario you had a little bit last year, size, where it gets a bit difficult is again with the navigation there, because if it's a real clear line and the dune's width is same across its width, then the danger markers in the road book make sense. But when the dune's falling away to one side or the other, if you're on a little cross-track area, you're on the right compass heading, but you're 200 metres to the right of the ideal line that the organisers have set, you might have no drop. And 100 metres to the left, so it can be a massive drop. And by the time a few vehicles have gone through, you see it, even the factory guys, like everybody's looking for their fresh bit of line through the dune. You don't want to be in someone else's wheel track. So the first guy has the hardest job because he has to pick the line, but then you've got sort of the next sort of 10 guys are in a perfect scenario where they can see the nav line going through, but they still got fresh sand to ride on. And then by the time we get there, when the 50 bikes have been and a couple of cars and 3 trucks, then there's no line left anymore. So you end up in a dangerous place.
So the last
that
point...
was very confusing. I know what I was talking about, even if no one
No, it makes perfect sense. No, it makes perfect sense. So the last part of Ray's question is a little bit of a technique question. He says, it appears that most riders are shifting their weight way back on the landings when they're jumping off dunes. What's that about?
They are terrified in that moment, bracing for impact.
Which I think, especially earlier in the week when they had a lot of really small dunes that they were running the wrong way, so up the slip face, over the kind of slack side, there was a lot of that as well, where it was super soft and then they were crashing because there was like hidden bits on the other side as well, right, where they've fallen into, they call them witches' eyes and so on.
Yeah, because the reason you've got to be back in that kind of jump is because if it is soft when you land, you're going to get thrown forward. It's as easy as that. And if it is hard pack, well, you sort that out. But yeah, it's just if you're in a kind of normal central jumping position and you land in a pocket of soft sand, it's all over.
And I think that's one thing that's quite hard with the dunes, especially when you're not that experienced, is I find this, and I'm sure you have as well, Si, is that the dune hides like these crazy soft pockets that you can't tell they're there. You only learn where they are by hitting lots of them. And you've seen it a few times in the last week where some of the guys, even though they're super good riders, they don't know that much about dunes. And then you see them wheelie off faces that you probably shouldn't wheelie off, or like ride into little bits of slip face and witch's eyes and things that you can't, they don't really get away with it. And then we've seen people going over the handlebars and lots of silly little innocuous crashes. ish. As a result of that.
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes you can run your wheels, a few inches to the one side, or 6 inches to the side of the guy that's gone in front of you. You're riding behind him, and he goes through clean, and you can just be half a wheel width to the side, and you bury the front. I mean, we've seen some great footage of that this week with the stuff with Toby burying the bike, multiple times in a row.
Yeah. On what looked like ultimately pretty damn small dunes, they were only, the slip face was only 6 foot high or whatever, and that was a great bit of footage.
Yeah, those kind of dunes are horrible. That kind of choppy, soft stuff, especially when the whole field has gone through as well.
Yeah,
and like a lot of the time, big dunes, the bit that makes a big dune difficult is like the fear of what's going to happen and how fast do I need to hit this. But the most difficult dunes are always those small ones that are close together, because you can't get any momentum and speed and rhythm. The big ones they're only difficult because you look at them and have a little moment with yourself where you don't commit, but actually they're usually not that hard.
Exactly. So, unless either of you have any more wisdom to impart upon this lovely podcast, we are coming up for 1.5 hours. So
wow,
we're going to do this again at the end and talk about.
Sounds good.
I talk about how right I was when Sam's got that medal in his hands and you two got it all wrong.
I'm gonna get a Barreda t-shirt done. That's how confident I am.
It's gonna go to the heaven where all other number 1 t-shirts that never actually got given to a rider goes.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. If anyone that's watching this is interested in listening to podcasts with way more wisdom and thought and sensibility about them, you can also do so through my Patreon page at patreon.com/break-magazine. If you want to know more about Sai, he is on Facebook. He's doing daily updates on Facebook, which are kind of detailed breakdowns of his viewpoint, his 50-50, sometimes correct, sometimes not viewpoint of the current situation in Dakar. They're very good. And if you want to look at old pictures of Sai Pavey from when he was younger, you can also find him on Facebook. That's a less appealing option, unless you want to.
Wow.
I kind of just portrayed it in like a really bad way, and it wasn't really intentional. It was meant to be a kind of, you can find this man on Facebook, but it turned into an abusive comment. I'm very sorry. It wasn't my intention. I had good intentions. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you after the end of the rally.
See you then.
Ciao, ciao.